Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov gang. Tonight, back by popular demand, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman journalism fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He writes the blog The Point on frontpagemag.com. Daniel Greenfield, welcome back to the Glazov gang.
Good to be back one more time.
A real honor and privilege to have you on. Daniel, let us begin with the Jerusalem synagogue massacre, and then I want to discuss the reaction to that massacre by the president and our media. Tell us a bit about the massacre first.
The act was horrifically brutal. They attacked people with axes and guns who were praying from behind. They killed them while they were praying. They murdered elderly rabbis who were just there, who were not in any way political, who were not in any way involved in politics at any rate. 3 of them were Americans, 1 of them was British. The butchery was horrible. A volunteer doctor at the scene described seeing men with most of their faces gone. The photos of blood-covered bodies from the synagogue, I think a lot of people have seen them, are genuinely horrifying.
Daniel, Islam is a religion of peace. Palestinians want peace, so says Obama. So who did this and why?
Well, they do want peace. This is their idea of peace. By peace, of course, they mean submission to Allah. They mean dominance. They mean supremacy. What they don't mean is coexistence, because coexistence is not peace in the Islamic lexicon. In the Islamic lexicon, there's peace when the issue is resolved, and the issue is resolved when the infidels submit to Islam. Now that those people are dead, in the Islamic sense, they're at peace. They've submitted to Allah.
Daniel, who perpetrated this?
You're talking about Muslim terrorists incited by Abbas, incited by Hamas, and with credit apparently taken by the PFLP.
Tell us about the Gazans' reaction. In the point you covered this partying in the streets, celebration, giving out candies, people brought out axes. What was going on in Gaza?
Celebrations, parties, they have this after every terrorist attack. The bigger the terrorist attack, the better. People begin handing out sweets and candies to each other. There are parades, there are parties. It's a good time for them. When they manage to kill some Jews, you have the same thing. Even non-Jews, just any infidels, you had the same thing happening after September 11th. There was video of that.
Daniel, so this continued mantra in the West that Islam is a religion of peace. If Islam is a religion of peace and Palestinians massacred rabbis, they're partying in the streets, where was the Palestinian reaction that represents Islam and condemned this attack?
There's the usual, we sort of condemn this in English while we support it and endorse it and celebrate it in Arabic, which is the only thing you've gotten from the Palestinian Authority for 2 decades now, which is that on the one hand they will, under some pressure, say that maybe this is sort of wrong in English. Meanwhile, on their website, Fatah put up a video by Arafat's bodyguard explaining that when Arafat condemned terrorist attacks, he didn't really mean it.
You had a piece on The Point talking about how CNN covered this. I mean, this is just, I don't even know if bizarre or evil or both, what words we should use to describe this. But in The Point, you discussed how CNN even somehow angled this, that this was somehow an attack on a mosque, as if Muslims were the victims.
They claimed that it was an attack on a mosque instead of an attack on a synagogue. They described 2 Palestinians shot by Israeli police. When there was an entire meme, actually, this based on Twitter, in which, for example, you have a man attacked a knife, and 2 planes and 8 Muslims were killed during a plane crash at the World Trade Center. It's the same kind of bizarre headline that completely cuts out the Jewish victims and turns Muslims into the victims. But that's a major staple of news coverage these days.
And why is it a major staple? We know it's because the left controls the boundaries of discourse and is in control of our media. What is the agenda? Jew hatred and what else?
Jew hatred, and Muslims have to be the victims. They have to be the oppressed people. That means eliminating any context in which they're the oppressors, in which they're the perpetrators. In any situation, Muslims have to be the victims. So after every terrorist attack, there are 2 messages. 1, the terrorists are not really Muslims, they're un-Islamic. 2, there's a backlash starting against Muslims, and now Muslims are the victims.
So when the Muslims behead the infidel needs to say mea culpa.
Yeah. I mean, the Muslim is the victim.
This is what sociopaths are also very good at, perpetrating violence against victims and making victims apologize. Obama made also a very interesting statement, if that's one word to describe it. He decided to say this. We know that 4 rabbis were massacred in a very brutal way. Obama chose the occasion to say, too many Palestinians have died. How does this add up, Daniel?
Again, the Muslims are ultimately the victims here. They're responding to Israeli provocations. They're responding to Israeli attacks. Too many of them are dying. Israel needs to do something for them. It's ultimately all about Israel somehow making appeasement, making concessions to make this go away. Otherwise, the violence will continue. That's always the underlying message.
Obama also said in his statement, Daniel, that the majority of Palestinians want peace. How do the majority of Palestinians want peace when there are celebrations in the street every time a Jewish person is massacred by Palestinians?
The polls show that the majority of them do not want peace. The majority of them support terrorist attacks and suicide bombings. So that's certainly not true. Abbas, whom he claimed strongly condemned the attack, is going to continue paying money to the families of the perpetrators. He's going to go on paying salaries to terrorists who have done things just as bad, who are sitting in Israeli prison or have been exchanged. So he in no way condemns terrorism. In fact, he's the head of a terrorist organization. That's like saying that Osama bin Laden condemns terrorism.
So what do we say about Obama, Daniel Greenfield? Also a Jew hater, a defender, promoter of the Palestinian death cult?
I think it's a subset. The big story, of course, is that Obama continues to support Islam, he continues to support Islamic terrorism, and he continues to cover up for it. Whether in Israel or in the United States or anywhere else, there's a consistent pattern to his statements.
Daniel Greenfield, let's move on to some more what I would call diabolical, perverse statements by our president. I mean, we're entering a really surreal era, and it's frightening. Another beheading by the Islamic State, this time of Peter Kassig. And tell us what Obama chose the occasion to do when terrorists of Islam use Islam to behead an American.
As usual, the first thing to do is to explain that the action is un-Islamic, but that the victim now represents the best traditions of Islam. So again, the Muslim has to be the victim. When the Islamic State beheads an American, it's not an Islamic State. It's not Islam turning an American into a victim. It's the un-Islamic Islamic State turning a Muslim into the victim. It always has to be about the glorification of Islam. It has to be about the innocence of Muslims. And I think that title is very well chosen.
And Daniel Greenfield, he did this by calling Peter Kassig Abdul Rahman. Tell us why.
He chose to use the Muslim name. I believe that Kassig actually converted to Islam like most of the hostages did while in captivity. The idea that you should really take the religious conversion by a hostage credibly and that you should use it to promote Islam once the hostage is dead is, to my mind, extremely dubious and extremely despicable.
Well, let's use an analogy here. An individual is kidnapped by Nazis. The Nazis tell him that they're going to kill him if he doesn't convert to Nazism. To save his life, he converts to Nazism and adopts a Nazi name. A president of the United States makes a statement after that individual is killed anyway by using that person's Nazi name and saying that that person as well as Nazism is a victim of the people who killed him. So you exploit that situation by actually promoting Nazism.
You do, because that's what you've set out to do, and that's really what Obama has set out to do along. In every instance, Obama promotes Islam. In every instance, Obama covers up for Islam. So even when an American is murdered by Muslims, then Obama has to flip things around so that America is the villain and that the Muslims are the good guys.
Daniel, let us be truthful, therefore. An American president is doing this. Who is this American president? Why is he doing what he's doing?
Well, he's certainly a president. Whether or not he's an American president is far more debatable.
And what do you mean by that?
I mean, that certainly he sits in the White House, he presides over America, but I don't think there's much American about Obama, certainly not in his sympathies or in his outlook.
Do you think Obama is more sympathetic towards the Islamic world than towards his own country?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Certainly the last 6 years have shown us that in every instance, his empathy, his sympathy is drawn toward the Muslim world. He doesn't appear to have much sympathy or empathy for Americans.
Daniel Greenfield, tell us the gains the Islamic State is making recently and what the Obama administration is doing to try to, and I'm saying allegedly, try to counter ISIS.
Obama is dropping some unaccompanied minor bombs on the Islamic State. He's doing it rather clumsily because, again, he insists on controlling the war, on controlling every aspect of the war, on having a situation where the military has to get permission for every strike it's going to carry out from some of his civilian functionaries who might have been, whose sole credit in this regard is that they were driving a campaign bus 6 or 7 years ago. So the war is going badly because the Islamic State is mobile. It can decide where to strike and when to strike. While the United States is still playing games, it's still bound by Qatar. It's still trying to avoid civilian casualties. It's still bound by the same doctrine which Bill Clinton quoted when he said the day before September 11th that he could have taken out Osama bin Laden, but there would have been 300 people in collateral damage in Kandahar.
So, Daniel Greenfield, what does the future hold in terms of what ISIS is doing and if whatever we can call, I don't even know if we can call what Obama is doing a foreign policy, but whatever it is that Obama is doing?
We're going to see more ISIS in different places. They might go by different names. But the basic premise, you seize an area, you expand the Royal Emirate, you turn it into a caliphate, you declare yourself a caliph. We're going to see that in Africa. We're going to see it in Asia. We're going to see it most likely spreading around the world in the next 2 decades, unless the United States gets a new kind of leadership that takes the threat of Islam seriously.
And what if it does?
If it doesn't, then we're going to see it in the United States and Europe as well.
Do you think that there's a possibility that we will see what ISIS is doing in Iraq and in Syria in the streets of the United States?
I think given time that we will see it. We already have these little secretive Islamic towns, the Islamburgs that are hiding out where you have people gathering, training, using weapons. They just need a sizable enough population to be able to maintain this kind of civil war over an area. And they have Islamophobia. They have authorities that are very afraid of being critical of Islam in any way as their best defense. So given time, given continued Muslim immigration, then we will see it.
But in order to stop this, our society and our leadership, our higher literary culture, our overall culture has to admit that there is a problem with Islamic ideology. How is it going to do that if the left has been so successful in conflating that with being a racist?
It's going to do that because at some point things are going to get bad enough that people have to wake up. We're seeing that to some extent in Europe. And we're seeing a tension because denial gets harder and harder. The worse things get, so you have a push between two tensions. On the one hand, you have the reality, you have the situation that's going on. On the other hand, you have denial and Stockholm Syndrome and all the other elements that are preventing us from coming to terms with what is happening. So one of these is going to have to crack sooner or later. So either we go into a complete state of denial and delusion, or the denial and delusion crack and we come to terms with the horrible situation we're facing.
But at the present moment, the left controls the boundaries of our discourse, and because of that, we are sinking in quicksand and committing suicide as a civilization. With the minutes we have left, Daniel Greenfield, you had some brilliant blogs on this. MIT economist Jonathan Gruber, who helped draft Obamacare legislation, has a couple of very interesting videos out. Tell us about it.
Well, Gruber was a really smart guy, an incredibly smart guy, an impressively smart guy. He's so smart that he enjoyed going to a lot of conferences and discussing how stupid the American voters who voted for Obama, the American voters who were fooled into supporting Obamacare were. And those videos began coming out because, one of those stupid people was actually watching those videos and collecting those videos and began releasing those videos on Twitter. And now the White House is disavowing Gruber, even though he practically lived there. He was in the visitor log so often. He met with Obama. He was in Obamacare commercials. His name was practically all over Obamacare. And now the White House is explaining, as usual, that they just found out about Gruber from the media, because that's where the White House always finds out everything from.
What is the significance of what he's boasting about? It does show and reveal that there was a hoax perpetrated from the beginning, correct?
Yeah, it shows bad faith from the beginning. It shows that from the beginning the Obama administration planned how to lie about it. It decided to lie about it. This wasn't just some accidental thing that happened along the way. This wasn't, we had good intentions and then we messed up. This was, they planned how to fool the American people from the very start. That people understood that they were fooling the American people from the very start, and that's what they were being paid to do.
And where is MSNBC, CNN, and New York Times and Washington Post starting Grubergate and making a big fuss about this when the American people and the media are being intentionally lied to by the administration?
Well, they were also part of the lie, and most of them are perfectly cheerful to go on lying now. They're part of the party. It's like Pravda. They're not about to simply turn on Obama unless the story gets bigger and bigger. And I think that's really why Obama is pushing amnesty now all of a sudden much more loudly, because he desperately needs a distraction. The story's been trending on Twitter for days. There needs to be something to quickly take people's attention away from it and prevent the media from being forced to cover it.
And make a prediction on how his maneuvers on immigration will go.
He's going to, we already know the basic plan that he's pushing. The question really is, the ball's in the court of the Republicans. It's a question of whether the Republicans are going to do the right thing, whether they're going to stand up to Obama, or whether they're going to say, make a few futile gestures and basically pave the way for Obama to transform the American electorate.
Troubling times, but we have a man of wisdom, Buddha of great knowledge and courage, who is Daniel Greenfield. What an honor and privilege it is to have you aboard at frontpagemag.com. Everybody read Daniel Greenfield's blog, The Point, at Front Page Magazine. Daniel Greenfield, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be part of the team.
Thank you. And we'll see you next week on the Glazov Game.